Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
John was coming down for breakfast. Today, he has an important trip to the neighborhood where he has to meet with the voters. The election campaign is in full swing. Now more than ever, he needs the support of friends, colleagues, and family. Although outwardly the businessman did not appear to be worried about the outcome of the election, Barbara knew for a fact that in her master's mind, like a swarm of bees, all sorts of thoughts were swarming anxiously. She had been a housekeeper at the Walker house for 15 years, knew the peculiarities and character of each member of the family, had been with them in sorrow and in joy, independently hired staff to maintain the beauty of the garden, general cleaning of the house, organizing holidays. The owner trusted her completely. The woman had no family of her own, only an elderly mother in the village. If necessary, John always let her go to check on the old lady, helped to get medicine, and when Barbara's mother fell ill, arranged in a good hospital in the city. She knew all the secrets of the family, was a faithful helper, not just a servant. "Breakfast is ready, John," Barbara said when she saw John enter the dining room, adjusting his tie as he went. "Cheesecakes with blueberry jam today." "Thank you, Barbara. Just make me some coffee. I'll eat it later." The owner refused to eat various delicious cheesecakes, which again upset the woman. "Breakfast should be nutritious and full," she grumbled, serving the coffee. "You'll spoil your stomach, you'll get sick, you'll go to bed, and who will leave your son? Where will I put them? Will I eat such a mountain myself?" "Don't talk like that," John said. "You can feed Jacob when he wakes up." "Jacob didn't come home last night. He's still out," the housekeeper said. John wondered. His son hadn't come home again. That's where he's spending his time, and with whom? However, that was just as clear to the businessman. Lately, his son had become completely uncontrollable. Who would have thought, when John, being a very young man and a budding entrepreneur, took the little blue casket from the maternity hospital, that his blue-eyed son would grow up to be such a naughty boy. He invested so much in him, tried so hard to give a decent education, so that the guy chose a successful direction in life, and now every day he feels that he has completely ceased to understand his son. On the mind of a young man only partying, clubs, expensive cars and girls. On the way to the company office, John thought he needed to change the situation with Jacob. He felt that there was still an opportunity, but if he let the time pass, he would lose his hair completely. His son doesn't know the other side of life at all. He doesn't understand that you have to work hard to achieve a goal. That's what John himself did. It is not from the sky fell to him all his current fortune. Nobody gave him a dime for nothing. Everything John has today was earned by his own hump and mind. Jacob's wealthy father was ready to give him everything for nothing, and he didn't even bother to realize himself as a person, as a worthy man. And John wanted to be proud of his son. He wanted him to take one of the chairs of directors in his company. He wanted him to make his own decisions, to understand all the nuances of business with the precision of a professional. He hadn't been able to raise Jacob the way he wanted to. These thoughts were weighing down on John, keeping him from concentrating on his work. He sat in his office, leaning back in his chair. If parents can't raise a child to be a normal, decent person, the team will do it for them, John thought. At least that was the way it had been in his life. John's parents died very young. One night there was a fire in their village house. His mother was thrashing around in the smoke, not knowing what to do. Neighbors were running down the street with buckets to the house engulfed in flames. My father was returning from his part-time job, working nights at the metal depot to feed his family, so that they would not need anything. When he saw this burning house, he rushed inside, grabbed his wife by the arm and dragged her outside. "There's John," she screamed, "save your son." The father rushed back inside, barely visible in the smoke. Holding his jacket to his face so he wouldn't suffocate from the acrid fumes, he called out, "John, come back, where are you?" But the boy was silent. He hid under the bed from fright and could not utter a word. Finally, the father found the child, pulled him out, but he could not return through the door to the street. It was engulfed in flames. Then the man ran to the window. "Take the child," he shouted. Someone's hands took his boy. At that moment, the dilapidated roof of the house collapsed. The ceilings burned through and could not hold it up. A beluga howled outside at John's mother. "Save him! Get him out! He's in there. He needs help," she screamed, someone shaking the woman by the shoulders, dragging her away from the burning house, slacking her cheeks. John's father died in the fire, unable to escape the flames. At the funeral, the dead man's wife was blacker than a cloud. In a few days, she had turned from a young, blossoming woman into an old woman. Dressed in a black dress, with a bandage of the same color on her head, she sobbed uncontrollably, and no words could bring her relief. When the lid of the coffin resounded with the thud of clods of earth, her legs gave out, the woman collapsed next to the grave. "Urgently, call an ambulance. Don't you see, her heart is bad?" shouted someone in the crowd of mourners. The ambulance took a long time to arrive at the cemetery, and the paramedic pronounced the woman dead. That's how John's mother died. She couldn't bear the loss of her beloved husband. For some time, the boy was with neighbors. Good grandmother Selina always treated the boy well, and now she also felt sorry for the orphan with all her heart. But one day, strangers appeared at her fence. It was the staff of the guardianship authorities and the police. The boy was taken to the orphanage. Bora was only 3 years old at the time. "Poor little boy, why did he have to go through all this?" Selina wailed as she watched the car drive away. John's life had not been sweet. He was brought up in an orphanage, then in a school, then at the factory where he came to work as an apprentice. The guy absorbed like a sponge everything he saw and heard. Now the man is a successful businessman, about such people say, owner of factories, newspapers, steamships. Indeed, he owned one of the largest enterprises in the region. There was also his own newspaper, which printed the news of the city and the district. Except that John didn't own any steamboats, but he had several yachts. Sports Yacht Club did not bring much income. It was a hobby of the man, in which he just liked to invest money. You could say it was his weakness. On the bank of the river, the businessman built several houses, equipped the pier. Everyone who wished, having paid the rent, could have a rest year, ride on snow-white yachts, spend time with friends and relatives. The businessman himself often came to the yacht club. Looking at the river expanses, he calmed down. Sometimes it was just vital for him. John returned to his thoughts about Jacob. If he couldn't bring him up properly, there must be a team that would make a man out of the son. After some thought, the man dialed the secretary. "Ekaterina, please connect me to the plant management," the man asked. One moment, a woman's voice was heard in the receiver. By the way, John remembered his friend Steve, with whom they were brought up together in an orphanage. Steve worked as a foreman at the factory, which belonged to a businessman, but due to John's employment, they had not met for a long time. Although the first time after graduation from the orphanage, they sought each other constantly and supported each other. The man decided to talk to Steve. The idea that came into his head seemed unrealistic, but the businessman was not used to backing down. When the phone was answered, he asked to call his childhood friend, who worked as a foreman in the lathe shop. "Hello," the businessman greeted his friend when he came to the phone. "How many winters? How many years?" "Oh, it's you, John, or what?" surprised Steve. Who else? I want to see you. I have business with you. Do you want me to come to you, John?" the boyhood friend asked. The master was wary. He knew what position John held. Yes, in fact, everyone in town knew it. Walker was a well-known figure. Even the children knew him, because the businessman often came to schools and kindergartens, gave as much help as he could in repairing, buying furniture, plumbing, toys for kids. "I would like to meet with you, let's say, in an informal setting," John said, and Steve tensed up even more. What was his old friend up to? "Tell me where." "Come to the yacht club in the evening, sit down, talk about life, because so much time we have not seen," suggested the businessman. "Okay, I will," replied the childhood friend briefly. All day long, John was thinking about his son. As he was going to a meeting with his constituents, he called home. "Barbara, is Jacob back?" the oligarch asked the housekeeper. "He's back, John," the woman replied. "He went straight to bed. He didn't even eat anything, and I heated up some cheesecakes. What is it that I do? I cook and send everything to the garbage can." "Don't gibber, Barbara," interrupted the housekeeper. "You'll feed your pet when he's asleep." Barbara loved Jacob as if he were her own son. When she was hired at John's mansion, the boy was only 5 years old. He was a sweet creature with blue eyes and blonde, slightly curly hair. The woman immediately penetrated to the child, often played with him in the garden, always tried to feed him deliciously, read him books at night. The 5-year-old boy very much lacked the attention of adults. His father was always at work, came home at midnight, and his mother. John met his future wife at the institute. She studied at his stream, noticeably stood out against the background of other girls. Bright, always dressed well, liked to spend time in the company of friends, which she had a lot. One day John was in such a company. The girl herself approached him. "Are you bored?" she asked, holding in one hand a glass of. Angelica bit her lip in annoyance. How could she have forgotten to throw away the pregnancy test she had taken that morning? The term was still very young. She could have aborted it, and John wouldn't have known anything. Angelica's plans didn't include having babies, messing around with diapers. She also didn't want to ruin her chiseled figure. Seeing her husband's eyes shining with joy, Angelica tried to portray at least some semblance of happiness on her face. "Yes, darling, I am pregnant," she said, and immediately hastened to add, "but the term is still very small. I hope you will let me go to Turkey on the sea. My friends and I are going next month. It will be good for my body." "Of course I will," John was overjoyed. Angelica would finally give birth to his baby. He dreamed of raising him, teaching him how to ride a bike, and when he grew up, they would go go-karting and to the yacht club together. The man had dreamed of his own yacht club since he was a child. And now, when the construction of his huge luxury house is completed, he can begin to realize his own project on the riverbank. When Angelica's belly became noticeable to everyone around, and it was impossible to hide the pregnancy, the girl's character began to deteriorate. She was constantly in a bad mood, nervous that she could not go with her friends on trips, entertainment, and shopping. John noticed all this, but tried to treat his wife indulgently to smooth out the edges so as not to bring to quarrels. She provoked scandals and every time demanded money. Expensive things Angelica now ordered from catalogs, and when they were brought directly home, courier arranged a demolition, throwing at him expensive rags. "What did you bring me?" she shouted. "Do you think I can wear this? This is junk that's only fit for beggars." Soon there was not a single employee in the delivery service who wanted to go to the businessman's mansion. They refused, complaining to management about the feisty landlady. But by then, it was time to give birth, and the delivery men exhaled with relief. After Jacob was born, Angelica showed no interest in the baby at all. John had to hire a nanny, and with her came housekeeper Barbara. Together, these women looked after the baby. From the age of 5, Barbara took the boy to music school. The teacher said he had great promise. "Your son has the perfect talent to become a pianist," the teachers told John. He, in turn, generously paid for his son's tuition. When it was time to send the child to school, the businessman found the best lyceum in town. Jacob read poetry perfectly, easily coped with math, showed interest in geography and history. Only in high school everything changed. The boy began to study badly, sat at his desk, did not prepare his homework. "With all my respect for you, John," said the director of the lyceum businessman, "I cannot bring your son good marks for the quarter. He does not prepare at all. He passed the test work with a 2. He is careless about his studies." Then a white envelope with a bunch of bills appeared on the lyceum director's desk, and the businessman's son got A's in his diary. That's how Jacob graduated from the lyceum. By the time it was time to receive his diploma, Angelica was sunbathing somewhere in Greece. She returned to a carefree life, rarely being at home, disappearing to foreign resorts. One day, when John returned home, he found that his wife's things were gone, as well as the suitcase with which she usually traveled. On the dressing table, he saw a note. "I fell in love with someone else. I'm sorry." If it were not for work and his son, the businessman would definitely go crazy, depressed. But he had to keep himself in tone, to keep track of what is happening in the securities market, to optimize costs at enterprises, almost completely destroyed by perestroika. And then there were the worries about his son, who spent all his vacations with friends and showed no interest in his father's business. "When did I miss him? What did I do wrong?" thought John, seeing his favorite hair ruin his youth, spending time for entertainment. Clubs had become his favorite place. He was constantly rocking until late at night at parties in the company of the same major. This saddened and upset his father. Sometimes he tried to talk to his son, to convince him that it was time to take up the cause, but he waved away. "I'm too young. I've got my whole life ahead of me," Jacob said. "Do you really want me to sit in stuffy offices and spend all day summarizing incomprehensible and uninteresting figures on paper?" But his father was persistent and got his son into a good, prestigious university at the Faculty of Personnel Management. He wanted Jacob to work in his company's office after graduation and become a competent manager. However, The boy was not interested in that at all. He also sat through his college years without writing a single note, getting credits and passing exams, thanks to his father's connections and money. In the evening, after letting the driver go, John himself got behind the wheel of the car and went to the yacht club. The weather was beautiful on that May day. He asked his secretary Katya to call the manager of the yacht club and tell him that he was going to spend time with a friend today. Let everything be done to the highest standard, John told the secretary, appetizers, kebabs, and on my yacht, so that everything would be polished to a shine. All right, John. The road out of town was winding. The businessman drove to meet his friend, thinking over the upcoming conversation. How long had it been since he'd seen Steve? Probably 5 years. The last time John had been at the factory was when they were launching new equipment brought from abroad. He saw Steve, who was included in the commission, but there was no time to talk, to sit somewhere with a shot of cognac and remember their youth. But in the orphanage they were thick as thieves. Together hooligans, and then both stood in the office of the principal, with their heads down. Oh, they get in trouble for their mischief. Steve had golden hands from his youth. He was an excellent woodcarver. Younger pupils always asked the guide to make animal figures or whistles, and Steve did not refuse. He was a handy guy. He chose a difficult profession. At first, he came to the plant as an apprentice turner, grew up to the master of the shop. Heading to the yacht club, John was very much hoping for help and support of his childhood friend. It's good to see you. The businessman greeted Steve as the men settled into the cabin. Yes, we don't see each other much, but life goes on, Steve said. Tell me how you're doing. What's new? John asked. He had already changed his clothes, having changed his business suit for simple pants and a light sweater, and felt comfortable. Everything's the same, Steve answered. You can, John assured his friend. You're the one who can help me save my son. What's wrong with him? Is he sick? Steve asked without understanding the conversation. No, he's alive and well and very well fed, John tried to joke. It's different here. The guy doesn't want to work at all. I gave him everything, education. He always has money on his cards. I replenish his accounts correctly. He recently bought a car, a cool foreign car, the only one in town. Live, work, and be happy. What about him? My childhood friend asked. Does not rejoice, or what? Yes, how happy, so that I see him once a day and then a glimpse. All the time disappears in clubs with the same golden youth. All he can think about is partying. Today he came home again in the morning, and I can't say a word to him. My only son, my only hope and support. What can I do to help? Steve didn't understand. Suddenly John changed the subject. And let's drink to the meeting. He poured cognac into shot glasses. It's been ages. They drank and snacked, and there was silence in the cabin. After a little thought, John continued. Set him up in your shop, he asked his buddy. Steve's eyes crept up to his forehead. A guy who can't do anything with his hands. Put him on a machine where you need precision, attention, responsibility. Any mistake can cost a lot of losses to the enterprise. The man thought about it, scratched the balding back of his head. And what will the workers say if he brings the son of the factory owner to the shop? Immediately they will think, Blatma, he all the favors, and the salary is the same as those who have skills, knowledge, experience. I don't know, Steve said uncertainly. Why would a guy do that? You better get him a job at your company. He'd be sitting, going through papers in a clean, spacious office with air conditioning and a soft leather chair. No, you don't understand, John interrupted him. I wanted to finally understand that in order to achieve something in life, you have to work, you know? Steve didn't understand. If a guy has everything, why would he pull his weight, work hard, and try to achieve something else? All he has to do is snap his fingers, or rather insert a card into an ATM, and he has everything. Here I am, continued the businessman, pouring cognac into shot glasses. Nobody gave me anything for nothing. I studied, labored, worked like an ox to create my empire. Let him see the other side of life a little. Take him to your shop, teach him how to work, like a childhood friend. And I will not be indebted to you. I'll do whatever you say. I don't want anything from you. Why do you insult me? Steve got angry. Well, let's see what you've raised. Have your Jacob come to the plant office tomorrow, and I'll write him a pass. I'll be waiting outside the personnel office. The friends changed the subject. John was relieved. He hoped Steve would do the right thing, and he knew that if he took Jacob on, he wouldn't give up. The men hugged each other and shook hands. As Steve's car drove away from the yacht club, the businessman dialed his home phone number. Barbara answered. "Barbara, is Jacob still home?" The landlord asked. "John, Jacob is home. He ate very badly, and I made stuffed cabbage and salad and baked a plum pie." She could go on and on about her gastronomic masterpieces, but the businessman interrupted. "Tell him to be sure to wait for me. It's very important. If he tries to leave, try to delay him," the owner ordered. "Even rope him. I'm on my way." "I'll do it, John. I hear you. Detain him. Rope him like a soldier," Barbara said. But Jacob was not going to the club tonight. He wanted to lie on the bed in his room and listen to music. He was in a bad mood. He treated Veronica to cocktails all night at the club, danced with her, fulfilled her every wish, and she left without warning, with some biker. Jacob had liked the girl for a long time. Beautiful, funny, from a wealthy family. He was about to introduce her to his father as his fiancée, but it turned out she didn't take him seriously at all. "You're just a kid," she told Jacob, laughing when he tried to kiss her. "Milk still on your lips, and yet you're still kissing. I need a tough guy, not a daddy's boy with a platinum card." At first, Jacob was offended, but then he thought she was flirting with him, teasing him. But it turned out Veronica really didn't see Jacob as her boyfriend. Barbara was serving dinner in the dining room when John arrived. Walking by, he said, "I'll go to my room, change my clothes, and come downstairs." Dinner would be ready in 10 minutes. Barbara was carefully laying out the cutlery. "Call Jacob, tell him I want to have dinner with him." The businessman quickly climbed the stairs to the second floor, opened the door of his room. "Jacob, let's go to dinner," called the guy lying on the bed wearing headphones, the housekeeper. He didn't hear her. The sound of the music playing loudly reached even Barbara. She walked over to the guy, touched his shoulder. He took off his headphones, raised himself on his elbow, and asked grudgingly, "Well, what else?" "I say come down for dinner," Barbara repeated. "I don't want to." "Father's here. He said you must come down, my boy. He's got something important to talk to you about." "Come on, don't make John angry," Barbara advised Jacob conspiratorially. She knew the boy's weaknesses and was able to influence him sometimes. Jacob got out of bed and followed Barbara with a disgruntled look. His father came down to the dining room. The housekeeper set the table, poured freshly squeezed orange juice into glasses, and disappeared through the doorway, saying, "Enjoy your meal." Barbara said, "You wanted to talk to me, Dad. Is something wrong?" Jacob started first. "Something happened, son," his father said seriously. "What's wrong is that I've raised a real jerk, a worthless little man who's wasting his life away." "There you go again." Jacob threw his fork down unhappily on the table. "If you're going to rub my nose in the fact that I'm an asshole who lives off you, I've heard it before. You're not going to tell me anything new, so I'm going to my room. I don't have an appetite." Jacob wanted to leave the table, but his father sharply stopped him with a loud voice. "Sit down," I said, "and listen." The man felt himself getting angry, but he tried to keep his emotions in check. The boy sat down in the chair. It had been a long time since his father had raised his voice at him. Apparently, he was sick of Jacob not wanting to get a job, but he didn't understand why he should work when his car was worth several times as much as his father's employees earned each month. "I've made a decision. From tomorrow, you will work at my factory as a turner." "Are you out of your mind?" Jacob shouted. Suddenly, he started laughing loudly. The nervous laughter echoed through the room. "I'm a lathe operator. Sometimes I'm amazed at your imagination. I'm a manager by training, not a laborer. I don't know from which side to the machine. I don't understand anything about iron." "But now you didn't surprise me," John said in a calm voice, putting a piece of fish on his fork. "It's no secret to me that you know only about cars, liquor bottles, and girls. Oh yeah, I forgot, you know a thing or two about club music. You shake with your worthless friends Majors under the rumble in the club, twitch until the morning on the dance floor, and every month you get money from me. That's what you're good at, and it's not what I expected." "What did you want, Father?" Jacob continued to resent me. "For me to go to work every morning and come home at night, tired and worn out. To have only 2 free days a week. That I get a paycheck once a month. That's how most people in this country live," John said. "They are not people," Jacob answered him. The businessman could hardly contain himself before he snapped and slapped his son. "Who are you calling non-humans?" he said, looking into his son's eyes. "People who work hard every day, so that people like you cannot deny themselves anything. I started out as a laborer too, and you think I'm an inhuman? Jacob realized he'd overreacted and tried to return to a calm conversation. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. He lowered his eyes, staring down at the plate where the garnish had gone cold. Your prosperity, your happy life was provided for you by simple laborers, John continued, so please don't insult these simple people. Have some conscience and reason to change your stupid life. So, from tomorrow you will work as an apprentice turner in the factory. You'll be living in a dormitory, so please pack your things tonight. I've blocked your cards. Your paycheck should be enough to buy food. You've got everything else, clothes, shoes, cell phone, laptop, so that's enough. Jacob felt like this wasn't happening to him. It was just a dream, a nightmare that was about to end. The words "live in the dormitory" and "blocked cards" rattled around in his head. He couldn't imagine that his father would take such drastic measures. And all because he wants to spend time with friends, not sitting in a stuffy office. Father and son were silent. Jacob was digesting the information he had received so unexpectedly, while John wondered if he was doing the right thing by punishing his son in this way. Finally, Jacob got up and left the table. "Where are you going?" his father asked sternly. "I'm going to pack my things to move into the dorm," he snapped. The next day at the appointed hour, he stood in the corridor of the plant office at the door of the personnel office. The boy was waiting for his father's friend Steve to come out of it. "You'll be working under my old buddy," the father said as he got his son out of the car and opened the trunk of Jacob's suitcase. "Any questions? Go to him. Your probationary period is 1 year. You won't have access to the money on your card during that time. You can't come to our house. You'll stay in the dorms with the workers and shift workers. See how they live. If you do well and prove that you can work, you will return home and take a position in the management of the company." "I'm not even going to bother," Jacob grumbled, "because I really need your position in the company. They kicked me out of the factory on the second day and kicked me out of my dorm. Where will I live for a year? On the street or something? What kind of father are you if you do that to your only son? Won't your conscience torment you at night?" "Don't worry," replied the businessman, getting into the car. "My conscience is at ease. Now you are in good hands, and no one will give you any favors here. There's the door. Step forward. At the gate a pass is issued for your name. How to find the personnel department, you'll figure it out. You're not a small man." Father started the car and left. The boy wandered to the gate, rolling a suitcase on wheels behind him. He felt like a puppy thrown out the door. The feeling of resentment towards his father was getting bigger by the minute, a little more, and he would cry like a snotty boy. "Hey, kid, is your last name Walker?" A man of about 45 called out to him. "I," answered Jacob. The man extended his hand to him. "Let's get acquainted. I'm Steve, the master turner. And you're John's son, I take it." Right, he had no desire to talk to his father's friend. They were both on the other side of his life. His father makes Jacob do things he doesn't want to do, and this Steve guy is helping him with this crazy bullying. Standing at the door of human resources, Jacob was scrolling through everything that had happened to him like some kind of movie. It seemed like the whole story wasn't about him, but about some guy who looked a lot like Jacob. He tried to imagine his place of work and his role in the production. The picture wasn't coming together. What awaited him? Jacob didn't understand. He had no idea what a lathe operator did, but logically speaking, he must have machined something. Jacob didn't notice when Steve came out of the door of the HR department. "Leave your suitcase with the girls in HR. I've arranged for you to pick it up after your shift." The man opened the door for him, inviting him to come in and leave his things for the time being. They walked through narrow corridors, some passages, until finally they came to a large metal door, which looked more like a hangar gate. "Come in," Steve gestured. There was a terrible noise in the huge room. To hear the interlocutor, it was necessary not to speak, but to shout, shouting over the noise of the working machines. "You could go deaf in here in a couple hours," Jacob thought. Steve gestured for him to follow. He stopped at a machine where a bearded man was working. His hands were huge, and his fingers looked more like boiled sausages. Jacob compared them to the long, thin fingers that his music school teacher had once liked so much. His hands were not for hard work, but rather for a musical instrument. Steve also had a hard time with his childhood friend's whim to get his son a job at the factory. In the personnel department, he did not dare to say that his protégé is the son of the one. What people would think of him, that he was following the owner's orders in order to get a better position. Steve never fawned before anyone, never did favors that would be contrary to his principles. He just worked honestly, putting all his heart, knowledge, and skills into his work, but he could not refuse his friend either. One thing was not clear: why Walker himself did not call the personnel department or even the director of the plant and did not tell about his desire to attach his offspring. He wouldn't have been refused even if he had to fire 10 people for the sake of the plant owner's son. "Jacob, this is Evan, our best worker. From today, he will be your mentor. He will teach you the trade from scratch, from the very basics." The bearded man stopped the machine and looked at the foreman with bewilderment and obvious displeasure. He was a man of character, knew his price as a specialist, had a huge experience, but Spiridonovich had one principle from which he never deviated. Bearded did not take pupils. "I'm not going to mess with these Braccadat Lummy," he once told Steve. "In the time I spend babysitting them, I can turn out a lot of parts and do some good for the factory. Let others learn." The foreman did not dare to argue with the principal worker. He agreed. Since then, students were not brought to Evan's machine. This prerogative favorably distinguished him from other turners, but no one ever took offense at the bearded man. "Have you, Steve?" said the bearded man in a thick bass. "Have you forgotten that I don't take brats?" I have not forgotten. The master patted the man on the shoulder. "And this one you'll take. He's a talented, smart guy. From childhood he dreams of becoming a turner, to work at our plant. You remember, last month they wrote about you in the newspaper. So the boy read the article. He's been looking forward to learning from you for a month." Now it was time for Jacob to raise his eyebrows in surprise. He'd never read any newspapers, of course, and this was the first time he'd ever heard of the bearded man. Steve continued, surprised at his own sophisticated powers of persuasion. "You see, you can't drive a man away from his dream. He may later become a worthy of your apprentice, will bring benefit to the plant, the newspaper will write about him, and you will be proud." When Steve himself meaningfully raised his index finger up, shook his hand and said, "You have brought up a worthy replacement, Evan. Our country needs such people. We can't do without them." The man scratched the back of his head, thinking a little. All right, the words of the foreman flattered the young laborer, so let's leave him alone and see what his dream is. Jacob looked at the whole thing in bewilderment. It was like a scene from some play he didn't know was playing out in front of him. For a moment he was amused and he smiled. "Why are you grinning?" Evan turned to him. "Today you will stand here all shift and watch what I do. I'll give you a safety booklet to memorize tonight, and I'll check it in the morning. Do you understand me?" Jacob made a serious face and nodded his head. Later he learned that Evan was a general turner. Not only did he have the right knowledge, but he could work on all kinds of machines with all kinds of materials, including wood and plastic. The boy watched how deftly the bearded man cut threads, hexes, and cones, which would later become parts for trains, airplanes, large batches of other industrial enterprises of the country. No one would know that he, Evan, had milled these parts, but everyone would know that his products would never fail in their work and would serve their intended service life honestly. Jacob looked at his mentor's hands and grew to respect him more and more. When he got to the dormitory, he collapsed on the old, beat-up bed. 2 other guys came in after him. They had grocery bags in their hands. "Hi, I'm Barry," one of them said, holding out his hand. "And I'm Austin," said the other, taking milk, bread, canned goods, and pasta out of the bag. "We were told you were boarded up, so welcome, as they say." The guys acted friendly. Paul liked them, but he was so tired from the rumble of machines in the shop that he wanted only one thing: to sleep. The boys went to the common kitchen to prepare dinner. An hour later, Jacob woke up to the pleasant smell of food. Seeing that the new neighbor opened his eyes, Austin invited, "Have a seat at the table, Jacob. We're keeping things simple." Jacob hesitantly took a chair, pulled it to the table, and a plate was placed in front of him. A large skillet stood in the center of the table. "We're having pasta and stew today," Barry said, "just like yesterday and the day before and all last week. There's no time to cook, so if you want to do anything substantial, it's on the weekend. Grab a spoon, spoon it up, don't be shy." Jacob ate a big spoonful of pasta and stew and wondered what his friends would say if they saw him eating this simple meal instead of oysters or mussels at one of the restaurants in town. They'd probably think he'd lost his mind. His first day at the plant was a challenge, but to his surprise, Jacob felt an inexplicable satisfaction with himself, with Evan's deft work, with the simple laborers he would be living with for a year. Would he be able to endure such a life? The next day, the alarm clock rang in the room where Jacob was put. It was in an iron bowl, and it rattled so loudly that it would have woken a dead man. The boys jumped out of bed. They started getting dressed. They hurried Jacob too. "You can't be late for the gatehouse," Austin advised. "A few seconds late could cost you a bonus, and you have to write a note of explanation. So let's get ready and get to the factory." Jacob looked for Ivan, but he was nowhere to be found. The bearded man's machine was turned off. Steve came up to the boy. "Why are you standing there? Go to the locker room. Your mentor's waiting for you." Jacob went in the direction the foreman had indicated, found the room called by the strange word locker room, and opened the door. Ivan was sitting on an old stool, smoking a cigarette. "Have you learned the safety rules?" he asked sternly. Jacob had forgotten all about the pamphlet he was supposed to read tonight. He passed out from fatigue as soon as his stomach filled with food and the heady feeling of satiety. "I forgot," lowered the boy's head. "Hey, you," muttered the mentor. "He forgot. How else to come to work did not forget? Do you have a bad memory?" The man's tone turned to mocking. "I was tired and fell asleep," the student tried to explain. Jacob felt like a boy who was being reprimanded by a strict teacher for not learning a lesson. He felt ashamed and embarrassed at the same time. How could he have forgotten about the booklet? He would have learned everything it said. "I see," Evan continued in a moralizing tone. "Since you don't know the safety rules of the lathe shop, we'll give you the most important job. Here's the tool." The bearded man handed Jacob a broom. The boy twirled it in his hands in surprise. It was the kind of broom he'd seen in the children's books Barbara had read to him when Jacob was a boy. What was he supposed to do with it? He was about to ask his mentor, but he intercepted his question. "You'll sweep up the shavings, then clean them up, understand?" Jacob nodded, though he didn't understand what his mentor was saying. "Let's go to the shop, and I'll outline the work." All day Jacob swung the broom. Occasionally he would go over to his mentor's machine and watch him work. Evan's work was mesmerizing. He marveled at the dexterity and precision with which he manipulated the metal blanks. His mentor didn't seem to notice his student, didn't explain anything, and apparently wasn't going to teach Jacob anything. Only at the end of the day did he call the boy over. "Hey, broom, come here," Evan shouted, waving his hand at Jacob. "Go to the accounting office, where they should give you a raise." "I don't get it," he asked, overhearing the noise of the machines. "What are they supposed to give me?" "Lift money," the mentor repeated. "When a man comes to work at our company, he is given a certain amount of money to support his pants, sort of." After asking where the accounting office was, Jacob went to get his allowance. The money was good for him. His father kept his promise and blocked all of his son's cards. Jacob only had a little cash in his pocket, but it wouldn't last until payday. Besides, the guys who put him up had been kind enough to buy Jacob dinner last night. He knew he should do the same. Jacob found a door that had a sign on it that said accounting. There was a small closed window and a shelf underneath it. The boy knocked hesitantly. The window opened. A young, beautiful girl with big brown eyes looked at him. "What do you want?" she asked. "I'm Walker. I was told to come in," Jacob said, confused. The girl lowered her head and began leafing through a thick magazine with pages written in ballpoint pen. "Walker, Walker," she repeated. "Oh, so you're here for the money?" For some reason, the girl started to address him as you. "Apparently," Jacob said, stammering. He thought he'd never seen such a beauty. She had thin fingers with modest manicures and no ring on her left hand. So pretty and unmarried, he thought. At that moment, the cashier slid a magazine through the window, pointed to a line, and handed out a pen. "Sign here," she said, holding the money in her hands. The guy signed his name, slid the magazine back. The pretty girl took it, checked it, and handed out the money through the window. "Here you go," she said, smiling, and Jacob realized he was drowning in her snow-white smile. "The advance will be on the 20th. We've been told that your bank cards are blocked, so you'll receive your advance and your paycheck in the accounting department, and when the squad is unblocked, the money will be transferred to the account you specified." "I see," Jacob said without knowing why. The girl smiled once more and slammed the window in his face. Jacob looked at the money that had been given to him. It certainly wasn't enough to support his pants. At least it wouldn't be enough for a guy to spend one night in a nightclub. He changed his clothes and went to the dorm. On the way, Jacob stopped by the pizza place and ordered 3 margaritas. He decided to treat his roommates. In the dorm, he placed the boxed pizzas in the center of the table. "Help yourselves, boys," Jacob said cheerfully. "Pizza's good," Barry said. "But if this is how you're going to eat every day, you've got 2 big problems." What? Jacob didn't understand. The boys laughed. They'd been through this in their first month at the plant. They'd gotten their paychecks, and they'd spent the money recklessly. Within a week, they had nothing to eat. Here's one, Austin said. 1, you're gonna be broke soon, and 2, you're gonna have terrible stomach pains. Maybe even an ulcer, and you'll be dead before you get your first paycheck. Put the pizza away while we feed you fries, Barry said. Jacob obediently pushed the pizza boxes away. Austin was already coming from the kitchen, holding a large pan of fries. Jacob devoured it with both cheeks. He thought that all of Verena's cooking was nothing compared to the world's most delicious potatoes. The boys talked happily over dinner, drinking milk with the fried potatoes. They had tea and pizza before they went to bed. Jacob's cell phone rang. The screen showed Phil's contact. He took the call and put the smartphone to his ear. "Kier, where are you? Where have you been?" Philip, his friend, shouted loudly into the receiver. "Why don't you come to the club? We've already lost you. We've been calling all day, but the pipe is disconnected." It was a rule to turn off cell phones when entering the factory, so no one could call Jacob during the day. "I'm in the dorm," Jacob answered. "I don't get it, buddy. I can't hear you very well," his friend shouted into the phone. "The usual factory dormitory," he answered calmly. "I see. Did you get a chick? Why don't you like our girls?" "No," Jacob answered. "I just got a job at the factory as a lathe operator." Barbara, he thought suddenly. She should definitely be able to help me out. He dialed the housekeeper's cell phone number. "Barbara, hello, it's Jacob," he said cheerfully into the receiver. But Barbara was whispering for some reason. "My boy, how are you? Are you all right? John forbade me to take your calls, threatened to fire me. And I've been wondering if you're fed or starving in that damn dormitory." "Barbara, I want to talk to you about food," the guy started, but the woman interrupted him. "Wait a minute, honey. I'm going out the gate. Your father's home. He'll hear me and chase me away," the housekeeper said. Jacob stared at his smartphone in confusion. Could his father have forbidden Barbara to talk to Jacob? He'd lost his mind. Not only had he sent him to work as a lathe operator, but he wouldn't let him talk to Barbara, who had replaced his mother in many ways. As Jacob pondered, standing in the hallway, his phone rang. "Barbara, I need your help," he said to the woman. "Oh, I don't know if I can help you, honey, because John." Jacob interrupted the housekeeper. "Listen to me," he shouted loudly at Barbara. Barbara was silent for a moment. "I live in a dorm with 3 guys. We're on duty, you know." "What?" the woman interjected. "What kind of duty?" "Well, every night we take turns making dinner for all 3 of us. The day before yesterday, Austin cooked pasta and stew, and yesterday Barry fried potatoes. The guy didn't get a chance to finish before Barbara started ranting again. Jesus Christ, you can't eat food like that. It's really bad for you. Oh, what does your father think he's doing?" "Barbara, will you shut up for a minute? Let me finish." Yes, my dear, I'm listening to you," said the housekeeper, who had stopped wailing. "So today it's my turn, and I don't know how to cook anything, you know. How can I embarrass myself in front of my friends? I'm sure we'll all go to bed hungry. Can't you cook something for the 3 of us?" "Jacob, honey, I'd love to, but if John found out, he'd brew me out of the gate." "Don't worry," Jacob said, "he won't find out. You better make some food and come to the dorm tonight." "Okay, Jacob, I'll try," the housekeeper said uncertainly. "You don't try, you do it. Do you understand me?" "That's it. I can't talk anymore. Kiss you. See you tonight." Jacob disconnected and went to the shop. For the rest of the day he swung a broom, removing iron shavings and other debris. On his way back to the dormitory from work, Jacob saw a familiar figure in the distance. Barbara was stomping near the entrance to the building. She was holding a large thermos bag, the kind that kept food warm for a long time. Jacob had taken food in a thermos bag before, when he and his friends had gone camping. "Hi," he kissed the housekeeper on the cheek. "Jesus Christ, what's going on? Your father's a fiend, a real one." Barbara began to lament in her usual tone. "Only eyes on his face, his cheeks are all sunken. What is he doing to you, my boy?" "Barbara, I'll show you where I'm at." Jacob pulled her by the arm. "Don't worry, I'm fine. The guys in the room are nice. You know how good they are at cooking. But I don't know how to cook." "It's okay," Barbara reassured him. "I've made you so much delicious food." The boy opened the door to the room and gestured for Vardy to come in. "Please, ma'am," he said in a joking tone. Barbara hesitantly entered the room, looked around. "Oh my God, "What a mess," she wailed again, but Jacob interrupted her. "It's not a mess. It's a creative mess. Come on, tell me what we're having for dinner tonight." Thermoses and containers appeared on the table, and the housekeeper put out a bag of baked goods. "I made dumplings with cherries and cottage cheese, and they're in a thermos so they don't get cold," Barbara said. "I also fried chicken as you like, with garlic and Provençal herbs. There are 2 containers with salads, and in that thermos there's a baked potato that should still be hot. Ah, yes, there are pies with meat, with cabbage, and with apples, and some fruit. How can we do without vitamins?" Jacob hesitated as he looked at all the gastronomic riches. At first, he thought he could get Barbara out of here in time to tell his friends that he'd made dinner himself. But now he realized that Barry and Austin. There was a pause at the other end and then laughter. Philip laughed in a way that made Jacob's ears hurt, and he pushed the smartphone away from him. "Buddy, did you take too much?" Phil had calmed down and was ready to talk calmly, but Jacob had passed out. "Friends?" Austin asked. "Yeah," Jacob's mood, so great, suddenly began to turn sour. "What's there to laugh about? A man worked in a factory. Is he the only one who worked here?" He decided to laugh, thinking Jacob's answer was a joke. "Don't mind him," Austin said, picking up the empty pizza boxes, because not everyone understands working people. Nowadays, everyone wants to be born with a golden spoon in their mouths, to have parents who are very rich and provide for everything. The majors don't need to get a job. That's why everyone wants to be a major, trying to pretend that they are the masters of life, because everything flows into their hands. We see you're not like that. Jacob thought that if his new friends knew that he was the son of the owner of the factory where he worked, they wouldn't be so friendly to him. So he decided to support Austin. "Yeah, I've seen a few of those when I was in school. They're loaded with money, but they've got just as much brains as these chickens." The boys laughed at the joke and nodded approvingly. They went to bed satisfied and well-fed. "Already falling asleep," Barry said. "Here, tomorrow it's your turn to cook dinner," and he fell into a deep sleep. In the morning, Jacob stood in line at the turnstiles at the gatehouse. When he approached the device and lowered his pass into the slot, a green light flashed on the machine and the barrier opened, letting the new worker into the factory. The guy walked in the crowd of workers to the shop, feeling himself a part of something powerful, strong, real. He changed his clothes and went to the shop, but even got in the way. "Why are you going to work without a tool?" he asked, squinting his left eye. Jacob didn't understand at first what his mentor was saying. Then he went slowly to the storeroom to get a broom. He spent the day cleaning shavings again, watching the turners work with admiration. At lunchtime, Jacob went with the other workers to the factory cafeteria. He took a tray, put a fork and spoon on it, and stood in line. It was the first time he had ever seen aluminum utensils. He had never had such spoons and forks in his house. To his surprise, he also discovered that there were no knives in the dining room. Jacob took a bowl of noodle soup, mashed potatoes with a cutlet compote, a few slices of raw bread, and a roll. The boy looked for a vacant seat at the tables where the workers were eating. Suddenly, a beautiful girl from the accounting department caught his eye. She was having lunch with an older woman, and they were having a leisurely conversation. "Are you free?" Jacob asked, coming over to the table where the accountants were sitting. "Yes, have a seat," the older woman invited him kindly. "Where do you work?" Jacob set the plates down and set the tray aside. "In the lathe," he answered, keeping his eyes on the girl he'd liked so much on his first day at the plant. "That's the new guy Steve brought in," the pretty girl explained to her coworker. "Oh right, Walker, I think the woman said. I remembered your last name right away. It's so interesting, it's exactly the same as the owner of our factory. You're not related, by any chance?" The woman smiled. Jacob realized she was just teasing him. It wouldn't have occurred to her that Walker's son worked in the lathe shop at the plant. "No, not at all," he said, waving his hand. "We're not up to such heights. We are simple laborers from the people, so to speak." The employees of the accounting department finished eating and got up from the table, putting away the empty dishes on a tray. The girl smiled at Jacob and went over to the table where the dirty plates were arranged. The boy chewed on his cutlet, glancing at her, and yet she was very much in his heart. Jacob had never felt this way before, not even when he'd hugged and kissed Veronica from the nightclub. Compared to the girl from accounting, Veronica now seemed like a Barbie doll from a store window, as soulless and lifeless as she was. Returning to the shop after lunch, Jacob remembered that today was his turn to cook dinner at the dorm. He didn't know what to do. The boy had never cooked anything on his own. He just didn't need to. Frying potatoes, like Austin and Barry had done, he certainly wouldn't be able to do. In principle, he could look up some step-by-step recipe on the internet, where everything is described in detail for novice cooks. In the spare moment when he left the shop, Jacob did just that. Several soups and second courses popped up on the search engine. He read the ingredients and cooking methods, realizing more and more clearly that he was not going to be able to master this complicated science called cooking. Would never believe him. So the boy decided not to deceive his new friends. When the boys walked through the door, Jacob said, "This is my relative from the village, who came to see how I'm doing, Barbara. And these," he pointed to the boys, "are Barry and Austin." They looked at the table, which was full of thermoses and containers. "I'll be honest with you, friends," Jacob said to the boys, "I can't cook, not since I was a kid. But Barbara didn't leave us without dinner. So I'd like to invite you to the table to eat all this food, so to speak. Good for you, Jacob, for not buying store-bought food. To be honest, we realized at once that you were unfit to live on your own and could not even fry eggs. As we walked home, we didn't think we'd go to bed well fed," Austin said, smiling. "And the smell's wafting down the hallway," Barry said. "As long as I've lived in this dorm, I've never heard food smell so good. Come on, help yourself." The boys sat down at the table, and Barbara bustled around, arranging potatoes and chicken on plates, opening containers of salads, serving the boys dumplings. They ate and praised, to the housekeeper's delight and Jacob's satisfaction. "I've never had such delicious apple pies before, thank you, Barbara," Barry said. "I can't stop eating dumplings. My belly's like a balloon," Austin laughed. Jacob was pleased. He knew that Barbara, who loved him so much, wouldn't let him down, and he knew she'd make all sorts of goodies. After they had eaten a hearty and delicious dinner, they lit the containers of leftover salads, put the potatoes and bits of uneaten chicken on plates, and put them in the refrigerator. "Tomorrow is slacker night," Barry said solemnly. "What do you mean?" Jacob didn't understand. "It's very simple. We have so much food in the fridge that we don't have to make dinner, so Austin's shift will be moved to the day after tomorrow." "That's a good idea," Austin said, sitting up on the bed, "and after this dinner, I don't think I'll surprise you with fried potatoes and milk." The boys thanked Barbara and walked her to the porch. "Honey, Jacob, you call me sometimes," Jacob's housekeeper hugged him. "I'm so worried about you." "Everything will be all right, but go, because if your father comes home early, you'll be in trouble." The month passed quickly. Jacob swept the broom around the shop every day. Ivan didn't seem to want to let him near the machine, didn't want to teach him how to turn. One day, watching his mentor cut a mill, Jacob shouted, trying to make sure the bearded man heard him over the noise of the machines. "Ivan, can I give it a try? I've been watching you work for a month now, and I've been itching to learn how to make parts like yours." The man stopped the machine. He looked at the boy with an attentive eye. "Well, it is unlikely to make parts like mine," he said with a smirk, "but you can try. Why not if your hands are itching?" He gave the boy a seat. At that moment, Jacob felt an inexplicable sense of delight, as if he'd returned to his childhood and gotten a cherished toy. Under the careful guidance and supervision of an experienced mentor, he was learning to turn. The work so captured the guy that he forgot about everything. He forgot about the offense against his father, about friends who no longer called him, about nightclubs. He enjoyed the fact that he had learned how to do this complicated, demanding work that required attention, precise calculation, and special skill. Jacob was happy to go to work, and when he realized that he had the right part, that it wouldn't go to the scrap drawer, he was proud of himself. It was time to get his first paycheck. At the end of the working day, the guy went to the accounting office, knocked loudly on the closed window. "Knock, knock, knock, knock," he shouted. The window opened, and Jacob saw again the beautiful girl who hadn't been on his radar the last few days. "I'm Walker, here for my paycheck," Jacob said cheerfully. "Hi." The girl smiled a charming smile and opened the payroll register. She ran her finger along the lines, saying softly, "Walker, Walker, here." She handed him the log, gave him a pen sign. Jacob signed his name, returned the magazine, leaned against the shelf under the window. The girl carefully counted the bills. "Here's your paycheck." She handed a wad of money to the boy and added, "Congratulations on your first paycheck." Jacob decided to act decisively. His heart was singing and his mood was high. "Thank you," he thanked the girl. "What are you doing tonight?" I'm doing housework tonight. The smile disappeared from the accountant's face. Can't your housekeeping wait, Jacob said. I'd really like to take you out for a walk. Suddenly, the window door slammed shut. The boy stood staring at the door. Then he turned and walked away. Proud, he thought. And the next day, she was at the door of the accounting office again. Jacob had a bouquet of chrysanthemums in his hands. He knocked on the window, and a second later saw the object of his adoration. Hi, he smiled. These are for you. Jacob held out the bouquet of flowers through the window. The girl barely smiled, took the flowers, and slammed the window shut. Wait, I didn't have time to tell you anything. Open up, the guy asked. Workers began to gather at the door of the accounting office, and Jacob was forced to leave. The friends lived cheerfully, they didn't quarrel, and on payday they put their money in a tin can. It's not just a can, but a bank, Barry said in a clever voice to Austin and Jacob. We'll use it to buy some groceries, as well as the necessities of life, toilet paper, dish detergent, and anything else we need. Everyone agreed with Barry's decision. It was much easier to go shopping together for potatoes, cereals, pasta, tea, and sugar once a month and buy everything at once than to run to the store every day. Jacob's already small paycheck was almost gone a week after he got his paycheck. He bought a bouquet of flowers every day on his way to work, which he presented to the girl in accounting. She took it, but she wasn't going to keep talking to him, slamming the window in his face every time. It was the second week of his courtship with the brown-eyed beauty. This time Jacob decided to write her a letter. If she won't talk, at least let her read it, he thought. He used up several sheets of paper. All the words seemed so dull, uninteresting, unconvincing. In the end, he just wrote, waiting for you at the bus stop outside the factory at 6 p.m. Jacob. The guy didn't expect the girl to show up, but he stood there waiting nonetheless. He was about to leave when a girl in a dark blue dress appeared in the distance. Hello, Jacob said, smiling happily. I'm so glad you came. Of course you came, said the girl. This is my stop. I get home from here. How could I not come here? Jacob realized he missed. She wasn't here for a date, just to get on the right bus to get home after work. He bit his lip, thought about it, lowered his head. Suddenly, he decided that if she didn't want to go on a date with him, then he would go with her and walk her home together. They stood in silence for about 10 minutes. When transportation arrived, the girl got on the bus. Jacob followed her. She sat down in the open seat, and the boy stood next to her, holding onto the handrail. To his surprise, they had been traveling for a long time. The high-rise buildings had already ended. Private sector houses flashed in the window, and soon the bus left the city. The girl sat silently, not paying any attention to Jacob. It was like some kind of ridiculous child's play, but the boy decided to be persistent. Finally, at one of the stops, the girl got up and headed for the exit. Jacob followed her. He walked beside her and was silent, and the girl was silent too. Soon they came to a wooden house with a gnarled fence. She stopped, opened the gate, and entered the yard. Goodbye, sweet girl, Jacob shouted to her, standing alone behind the fence. The girl didn't look back or answer. But the boy noticed the curtain in one of the windows sway after she had entered the house. He smiled to himself. So not all was lost. She wondered if he left right away or waited a bit. Back in the dorm, Jacob kept thinking about his beautiful stranger. He'd never learned her name in all this time. After dinner, he lay on his bed, wondering what her name might be. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Austin's voice. Why did you stay late today? Did you work overtime? No, I was just seeing the girl off, Jacob said. The boys clamored. Woo, you got a girlfriend? That's the thing, I didn't. I've been bringing her flowers for 2 weeks, and today I followed her home after work, and she wouldn't say her name. That's good, Barry said in a sleepy voice. Why it was good, Jacob didn't understand. It means she's a good girl, he said knowingly. I mean, if she throws herself into a hug, who is she in layman's terms? Yours is an honest, decent girl, and not every guy will get acquainted with her. Maybe she has a husband, Austin suggested. Jacob hadn't thought of that. He really didn't know anything about the girl from accounting. So he's walking her home, and she's going to her husband. The guy's heart ached with pain. He fell asleep, and in the morning he bought a bouquet of flowers and brought them to the window in the accounting office. Jacob knocked. As was his habit, the window opened, and he held out the bouquet, but suddenly he saw a colleague of the girl he liked. Luca's admirer, the woman said in a joking tone. Well, give here your bouquet. We will soon from the accounting department in the flower boutique. Everything is already covered with your chrysanthemums. At least turn on the imagination. Other flowers chose. The woman took the bouquet from Jacob's hands. So her name is Cecilia. What a beautiful name, he thought. He would be sure to get her a Cecilia next time, and he bought chrysanthemums because they were inexpensive and looked pretty. On his small salary, Jacob couldn't afford to give roses to girls like he used to. Where is Cecilia? He said her name aloud and felt it sounded special, like heavenly music, like the trill of a brook. Oh, she's on sick leave, the woman said. What's wrong with her? Jacob persisted. She has a cold. She'll get better and go back to work. She'll be pleased with the flowers. Jacob stood at the open window of the accounting office for a moment. Since his colleague Cecilia was so easy to talk to, he decided to ask the question. Do you know if Cecilia is married? The woman turned around, walked leisurely to the window, leaned both hands on the table. Why do you want to know? She asked, squinting. You see, I like Cecilia very much. I want to meet her, to ask her out, but she won't talk to me at all. Yesterday I even walked her home and she didn't say a word. The woman was quiet for a while. She saw the guy is good and Cecilia is long overdue for marriage, and maybe they will get something. Go for the ranch, she laughed. Cecilia is not married. She lives with her grandmother in the suburbs. It's just the two of them. Thank you, Jacob thanked the accountant. His heart was about to burst out of his chest, pounding frantically, and his ears were ringing. Cecilia, Cecilia. It was the most beautiful name on earth that Jacob knew. The next day after work, Jacob went to the grocery store, bought a pound of oranges, and followed to the bus stop. He was determined that today was the day he would finally meet Cecilia. After all, why can't he visit a sick girl with whom he worked at the same enterprise? Suddenly he noticed a gorgeous bouquet of lilies in the window of a flower shop. It was so beautiful that Jacob wanted to buy flowers for the girl he liked, especially the snow-white Cecilia, as touching and delicate as she was. Jacob pulled some money out of his pocket. It was all he had left until payday. If he bought flowers now, he'd have to starve, and it would be a week before payday. I'll borrow from the guys, Jacob decided. He knew that the guys sharing a room with him didn't spend money, but sent it to their parents. That's why they always had some stash. Jacob hoped it would help him out. I'll have that bouquet of white lilies, he said to the salesman, holding out the last of his money. Excellent choice, young man, the saleswoman approved. She handed him the bouquet, wrapped in soft cream-colored corrugated paper and tied with a white ribbon. Jacob waited for the bus, sat down in a vacant seat, and stared dreamily out the window. Autumn scenery flashed by. Summer had flown by so quickly that Jacob hadn't noticed the golden fall had arrived. The yellow-red trees flashed by the window, and he felt happy. Even didn't treat him like a fledgling. He didn't mock him. The man realized the boy was trying, so he would be good. A few days ago, he took him to the machine, said, "This is your workplace now. You've learned enough so you can do the operations unsupervised and on your own." Jacob was very happy. It meant that the team had finally accepted him, that he had convinced his strict mentor that he would not shame him. Master Steve smiled approvingly at Jacob too. The boy was surprisingly bright and diligent. To be honest, Steve hadn't even expected Evan to teach Jacob how to turn. In a month the guy's dad will come to his senses and take the hair out of the factory himself, thought John's old buddy. But the factory owner didn't call or come, and Steve decided to hold his horses while watching Jacob. The boy was proud of himself for accomplishing something without his father's help. He'd always thought of his son as a worthless boy who could only party in nightclubs and get girls. The bus stopped, and Jacob got off, looking around. He remembered the street where he'd seen Cecilia off last time, and walked straight down it. When he reached the house, he stopped, hesitant to open the gate and enter the house, because he hadn't been invited. What if she got angry and sent him away? Jacob stood like that, holding the bouquet of lilies for half an hour. Suddenly, an old woman came out onto the porch, a bucket in her hands. She splashed the water under a bush by the fence, then turned and addressed the young man. She had been watching him through the window for a long time. He stood there like a lonely man with flowers, hesitating to come in. Cecilia must have a fiancé. "How long are you going to stand there?" she asked. "Excuse me, is Cecilia home?" "Can I see her?" Jacob asked. "What's there to see?" the woman retorted. Is she a museum painting or something? Jacob was confused, not very welcoming, but he just wanted to please the girl he'd been attracted to for months. Suddenly, black clouds covered the sky, a cold wind blew, and a small, nasty rain began to drizzle. The woman looked carefully at the upset boy and changed her serious face into a good-natured smile. "Come on," she called to Jacob, as if he'd come from the city to get wet. "Yes," Jacob answered, silently following the woman. The house was quiet. Only the wood crackled in the stove. She pointed to the stool next to the table, and she said, "We'll make some tea, and then Cecilia will wake up." The woman made tea, poured it into cups, put gingerbread and cookies in the middle of the table. They began to drink the tea. Jacob was glad to be warm. In fact, he was very cold. "We live alone, son. We have to do everything ourselves," Grandma Cecilia complained. "My old man died a long time ago. I have a pension. I tell my granddaughter to get married. At least there will be a man in the house, or even with an apartment you'll find a fiancé. You'll move to the city. It takes her an hour to get to and from work every day. It's not easy for us. The fence has sagged. We carry water ourselves from the column. And when they bring firewood, it takes half of Lilka's salary, and we have to hire men to split it. One of them was chopping, but when he asked for money, he got drunk and never came back. So they lay there, soaking in the rain." Jacob pushed the empty cup away from him. "Where's your axe?" he asked. To be honest, he'd never chopped wood, but he had a theoretical idea of how to do it. The old woman willingly led him to the shed, took out the axe and handed it to the boy. "Can you handle it?" She looked at him incredulously. The woman could see that Jacob held the axe awkwardly, as if afraid of it, but there was nowhere to retreat. Grandmother Cecilia went into the house, and Jacob began to deal with the mountain of tow. When she heard the noise, the girl woke up. "Who's there, ba? Is the ringmaster here?" she asked. "I don't know if it's the ringmaster or the groom," the woman joked. "Ring bearers don't go around with such bouquets and oranges." Cecilia went to the window and saw Jacob Walker chopping wood in their yard. A smile appeared on her face. "Put the kettle on again, Granny," she said. "The boy's cold in the rain, and he's going to be sick." They sat together at the table and drank tea. Jacob was staring at Cecilia, which embarrassed her. It was getting dark outside the window, but he didn't want to leave. Cecilia said, "Jacob, you have to go. The last bus will leave soon. How will you get to the dormitory?" Jacob started to get ready, taking his jacket, which the girl's grandmother had hung by the stove to dry. "I'll walk him home, grandmother," Cecilia said, and followed Jacob out. She walked him to the gate. She stopped. "Thank you for the flowers and oranges," Cecilia said softly. Jacob wanted to hold her close and kiss her, but he didn't dare, afraid to break the thin thread that had begun to bind them. "I'll meet you at the bus stop after work tomorrow," he said, and walked away. That night he couldn't sleep for a long time. He kept picturing her beautiful brown eyes, a little sad, framed by thick lashes. Jacob realized that he wanted to admire them always and to be near this beautiful girl with the wonderful name of Cecilia. The next day he couldn't wait for his shift to end. As soon as the horn sounded to signal the end of the shift, Jacob quickly changed his clothes and went to the bus stop. About 10 minutes later, he saw a familiar figure. "Hi," Cecilia said to him. "Hi," Jacob smiled at her. "Are you going to walk me home again today?" the girl asked. "If you let me, I'll walk you home every day." She laughed, and the boy laughed too. Smiling and talking to each other, they rode on the bus. Grandma Cecilia didn't seem surprised by Jacob's arrival, and he took up the axe to finish the wood he'd left yesterday. "I see you're getting good at it," the pensioner praised him. "Put down the axe and let's go and have tea. My cakes are ready." Jacob walked Cecilia home from work almost every day, and on weekends he came to their house to spend time with her and help with the household chores. Grandma Cecilia always had treats ready for him. They were usually pies with different fillings. Jacob devoured them and felt very happy. Winter passed and spring came. The thaw made adjustments to the snow-white scenery, and the snow on the fields turned black and gray, looking dreary. But the drizzle and the chilly March wind didn't dampen Jacob's mood. Today he was going to propose to Cecilia. He was preparing for this date with great care. He hadn't bought anything new in a long time, and he didn't want to waste money on nonsense. He rummaged through the suitcase behind the closet in his dorm room and found the jeans he'd worn to a nightclub and a red sweatshirt. He really wanted them both to remember this day. At Cecilia's house, he was almost his own. Jacob opened the gate himself and walked across the yard to the door. "Anybody home?" he shouted from the doorway. No one answered. The boy went out into the yard again, walked around the unpretentious household. Where could they have gone, he thought. Suddenly, he noticed a black Jeep behind the fence. It was his father's car. He would never have confused it with any other. Jacob jumped out of the gate, but the car started up and drove away. "He's following me," he thought. A minute later, he saw Cecilia and her grandmother at the end of the street, carrying water from the fountain. Jacob rushed over to them and grabbed the buckets. "Couldn't you have waited for me? I've fetched it myself," he chided the women. "You're not allowed to carry heavy loads. One of them is already elderly in her old age, and the other one has children to bear. Isn't that from you?" Cecilia asked jokingly. They had already reached the gate and entered the yard. "Why not from me?" Jacob asked. "Oh, young people, how simple everything is," rumbled Grandma. "Just once and the children are ready. Where's the matchmaking? Where's the wedding?" "Now we'll start doing everything properly," Jacob said solemnly and put the buckets on the ground. "Dear grandmother, I ask for your granddaughter's hand in marriage." The woman laughed merrily. "Have you asked, Red Boy, if my granddaughter Cecilia will give you her hand?" It was like a game or a theatrical performance. Cecilia was embarrassed, her cheeks flushed and flamed, and she covered her face with her hands. Jacob pulled boxes out of his jacket pocket, walked over to the girl, took her hands away from her face. He handed Leela the box. "Will you agree to be my wife?" he asked. Looking at the ring, Cecilia was thoughtful. Then she shifted her gaze to Jacob, smiled, and said, "Yes," and he put the ring on her finger. Grandmother clapped her hands happily, then stopped and crossed Jacob and Cecilia 3 times. "God bless you, children. Live happily ever after." It was the happiest evening of Jacob's life. He was next to the girl he loved, barely making it to the bus back. She was watching him at the window, waving goodbye. If anyone knew how reluctant he was to leave. Jacob and Cecilia decided that they would marry in May. He would be on vacation, and she would take time off, and they would spend the happiest week of their lives together. The days flew by. Jacob's job was going well, and he was being praised, and last month he'd even gotten a bonus, which wasn't unreasonable for a young man about to get married. Cecilia was glowing with happiness too. At the wedding, then Call, having learned that the Turner Walker proposed to her, asked a colleague accountant. "Of course I will," assured the girl. "I wouldn't have a lot of guests at our wedding." "You have to feed a lot of guests," the woman shook her head. "Jacob is saving up every paycheck to make sure our wedding is the best. You know how smart and frugal he is, and he's a thrifty man." "Well, then you will not be lost with him," praised the choice of Cecilia colleague. May was fast approaching. Cecilia and Jacob were going shopping the following weekend to buy a dress for her and a suit for him. At work on Friday, Jacob was already looking forward to spending the day together. Suddenly, Steve brought the guys over to him. They were college students, brought in to watch the levee operators work. In time, they would also come to the factory, get a mentor, and work for the good of the country. "Jacob, here are the young people. Show them. Tell them what you don't understand. Explain. This is our shift." Steve introduced the guys and went to the exit from the shop. The guy was busy with the young people. It was not the first time he conducted such excursions. Steve often instructed him to tell the students about the work of a turner. He saw that Jacob easily finds common language with him, and the young people do not shy away from him, as older workers, feeling that Jacob is not much older than them. Steve was walking towards the exit of the shop and suddenly saw John in the doorway. He heard that the owner was due for an inspection the other day, but he didn't think his father would want to know how his son was doing. After all, he hadn't even called once this year, not even once. "Hello, John," Steve said to his old friend. "What are you doing here?" "Yes, I was at the factory on business, decided to look in the shop. I thought my son has not been here for a long time, but I look at him and I can't believe it. He's standing at the machine, handling the operations with dexterity. And who are those guys next to him?" "They're the new generation of levee operators, John." Jacob is explaining the machine to them. John shook his head in surprise. He hadn't expected to see his son in the shop. He thought he'd run away from the factory a long time ago. "How's he doing?" Walker asked his old friend. "All right, at first a month of grooming, shavings, and garbage. It was his mentor. Even so tested the guy for strength, hoping that he would run away and not catch up. But he's persistent. He clung to his mentor like a tick. He said he wanted to learn turning, that's all. You've made me happy, Steve, John praised his friend. And when I came to you, I thought that my idea was useless, that nothing would come out of it. But look at this. He learned to work and lives independently in a dormitory and does not ask me for money. I think it's time to take him out of here. I see that he's grown up, he's wiser, and he should come to my company and take a managerial position. Steve's getting sad. Ask him first, he said quietly, or again in the order to a new place of work. I'll figure it out. Just get him for me. A few minutes later, Jacob came up to his father. Hello, Dad. It's good to see you, the boy said. Hello, son, the boy said, reaching out to shake Jacob's hand. I see you've become a real turner, and you've learned how to work the machine, and you don't even remember your party. It's been a whole year since you've been at the factory, and you've passed the test with flying colors. Jacob listened to his father and didn't understand what he was getting at. The man went on with his speech. There have been a number of changes in the company during this time. Various personnel changes and new prospects are opening up, John said. I see that you have become mature and serious, and my test you passed with honor, so I am ready to unblock your cards and hire you in the office of our company. You'll manage the staff, no more dirty clothes. It's time to do what you spent 5 years of college doing. Finally, Jacob began to realize his father had come to see whether or not his son had coped with the task he had set for him, whether or not he had embarrassed a big businessman, whether or not he was worthy to be called Walker's son. Now she offers him a new step to manage the staff in his company, to be his right hand. But Jacob was not going to be anyone's right hand. He liked his job. Producing parts of impeccable quality, he felt not only pride, but also satisfaction. This was his professional happiness, and his personal happiness in meeting and waiting for his wedding with Cecilia. I'm not going anywhere, Father, Jacob said firmly. I belong here. I like working in the factory. Oh, don't be silly, son. John began to argue. How can you like working in such filth, in such noise? And the wages, I know they don't pay much. I don't know how you could live on that kind of money with all your demands. I don't have any demands anymore. I go to work. I try to do a good job. I live like everybody else. All right, enough with the sentimentalizing and pussyfooting around. Pack up, go to HR, write a letter of resignation. I told you I wouldn't quit. Jacob tried to convince his father. The factory has become my life. I like my job. And if the pay is low, I only have a year's seniority. If I work longer, I'll earn more. I'll get a higher grade. And you'll live in a dorm. John was indignant. All your life in one room, and then you'll get married and have kids. Steve told me that I would get an apartment in a new building within 5 years, so I'll put up with it for 5 years. Seeing that his son goes against his parental wishes, John got angry. In that case, I will not unblock your bank cards, he shouted angrily. I've lived without your money for a year, Dad, and I'll live more, Jacob said, which pissed his father off. I don't need your money. I can earn my own money now, and good people have helped me open my eyes to a different, more honorable, and right life. John waved his hand, snorting and angry, walked down the hall. He didn't understand when he had missed his son, what he had done, that his Jacob was now working at his own businessman Walker's factory as a simple turner. No, this was not the future John had dreamed of. Sitting in the car, the businessman suddenly caught himself in a strange spot that a year ago he also thought about his son. When he did not want to take up the mind, went out, had fun, and spent his father's money. Now he was working, earning his own money. What was he so mad about? A week after Walker's visit to his son, Cecilia and Jacob were married. It was a fun factory wedding. Instead of a banquet hall, the factory management allowed the use of the factory canteen, and here they prepared treats for the guests. The wedding was very cheerful. The music was playing loudly. The guests were dancing and having fun. Suddenly, the music stopped. An important man came through the door. People whispered. Someone recognized in him the owner of the factory, Walker. Hello, factory workers. The businessman looked around the guests, went to the table of the bride and groom. Hello, young people. I've come to wish you happiness. Live honestly, work hard, and don't forget that you have a father. Also, give me grandchildren. The oligarch clapped his hands loudly, and the workers supported him with shouts of bitter, bitter, bitter.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.